Today we get Season 5 mid-season patch notes, which are supposedly supposed to be one of the last updates Warzone will probably ever receive. They're bringing back some playlists that were fan favorites, and we'll kind of see how that works. Unfortunately, they didn't bring back Verdansk, it doesn't look like, unless they're going to surprise us. But it says greatest hits of the year. The playlist rotation will occur once per week. A variation of Plunder will be available every week. Fortune's Keep and Rebirth Island will also be present every week, with only the squad size rotation. So maybe they'll have solos available sometimes or not, and you'll be able to see those if you want to kind of look at those a little bit more closely. Rebirth Resurgence Supreme, which is interesting. They're actually going to have a reward for this one specifically. I believe if you get 15 kills in this mode and a win, you'll automatically get a calling card that's restricted to you. So if you have your teammates help you out on this one. So we've increased the tension. So the resurgence countdown timer is a little longer. I believe they said it's doubled. So maybe they changed that up a bit. Players have a slight increase in core health. So it's gonna feel like Iron Trials, because you're gonna have the 200 plus the 150, so it's gonna be like closer to 350. Getting elimination now shows enemy squad locations as a ping on the minimap for a longer period of time. It's actually going to show you on the minimap longer if your teammate gets killed, so that's interesting. Players now have more control over resurgence countdown. Actions now reduce the countdown twice as fast. So that's looting, kills, getting it down, completing a contract, I think buying stuff from the buy station. Avenging a squad will greatly reduce that countdown. So we've crafted supreme weapons. The ground loot brings back even more fan favorite weapons. The lowest rarity is epic. Players will deploy with iconic and powerful weapons. All weapons will have the most legendary skin that Warzone has ever offered. Pretty cool stuff. Obviously, if you don't buy that stuff, it's good to be able to pick that up. But the weapon buyback trade station should be crazy. If you have those, if they're in the game, you should be able to get specialists pretty easy, because you're going to have multiple chances with pretty much both your weapons, and you can still get your loadout weapon, right? We hope this mode will be a fun and challenging experience for everyone. Having a loadout isn't as important as it normally is, because they're making actually good floor loot. A message from Butcher: within Season 5 update comes a cinematic intro. Cool. Warzone stories. So you're going to get all these calling cards just for free for playing, as long as you log in, I believe. The loadout cost has also changed. So similar to Titanium Trials, where they tested that, buy stations will now cost 500 less per circle, and you can kind of see the breakdown there. ATMs will now appear in the Battle Royale, and those were originally in Plunder, where you stand next to them, they just spit out cash. There's not a lot of cash super fast, but it is very consistent and reliable. Gulag Tokens, redeployed tokens, have been doubled the rate in legendary boxes, slightly increased spawn rate in regular. These are hopefully to just keep the lobbies alive longer. Quality of life. Recommended weapons is now shown in the thing. I mean, maybe we do a video reviewing the recommended, see how well they did, because for the most part, they didn't really line up with the meta, but there could be a big shift there. Golden keycard bunkers will now have a yellow circle on the TAC map. And this is something I think they just removed, and then now they're bringing it back. And just from map knowledge, you would know where they are, but this is good to have that back for people that are just playing the game and don't really pay attention to those things as well. Manual gas mask. Improve manual gas text setting menu to better display how players manually equip the gas mask. Move the gas mask to the first entry in the quick inventory for easier equipping. That's something they had already done. Supply box UAVs will no longer show red boxes on Rebirth, because those restock. It gets kind of flooded. Okay, so perks, ground loot perks. Text will be displayed on the UI when a perk is acquired. So it'll say you picked up Dead Side, or that's not a perk. You picked up Battle Hardened, you picked up whatever, EOD, it'll say it on the screen. See, it says perk acquired. And then we got Scavenger pouch are now guaranteed 1,000 on every elimination. So you can stack up some cash pretty quick there. Or as you run over bodies, you will be able to get that cash along with the things there. And this could be particularly important for the thing I was talking about earlier with specialists, where you get all those perks, or you just get lucky enough to find the Scavenger perk. We got field upgrade, portable decontamination station duration increased to 20 seconds, up from 13. That is a sizable increase. So those things will last long. It means you can stay a minute in the gas if you have 3 of them on your team, right? A little bit longer if you have more. And then weapons, general ground loot and Gulag refresh. Leaning into the history of Warzone, you'll find some of the greatest hits from Modern Warfare, Black Ops, Vanguard. In the ground loot, we've significantly increased the variance offer to make the game feel more dynamic each drop. That's good. There will be a little bit more variety. They did this in Titanium Trials. They didn't talk about it, but it was a cool feature. If you went through and tried to get your wins on there, you know that the floor loot was different each time, which made it feel like, ooh, we got these guns. Haven't used these in a while. and it was kind of one of those things. New weapons, we got the BP-50 assault rifle. This is an old gun they're bringing back. I don't know how that fits into World War II, but more power to it. Just like the laser gun, it didn't make sense, but cool. And then the Liana 57 in Vanguard right now. You can log in, play, use these in private match. They shoot absolute beams, but they usually don't translate like that over to Warzone. So we'll see how that works, because usually Warzone, you know, you can manipulate 10 attachments to get low recoil. So we'll see how those play out. Hopefully they're good, so they're usable. And then there's a lot of weapon changes, right? Like just to clarify, there is a lot going on here. And what we'll do is kind of breeze through these. I already kind of have it on the side, so I know exactly what's going on with each of these. AMAX receives a buff. We got the Automaton receives a nerf, which I don't really think it necessarily needed, but more power to it. They're going to change it that way. M4A1 gets touched for the first time in forever. This is a Modern Warfare M4, and that one gets a slight buff to the next shot, kind of just giving it the growl treatment that they gave it not too long ago. QBZ received a buff. We got Odin receives a slight buff, which I think it needed, but it needs the ADS buff more than anything. I think the recoils there is hard to use, all those things, but it would have been nice to have that. EX1 receives a buff. It really wasn't all that strong. No one really used it. You knew you were going to challenge someone if you heard the laser, so good that got buffed. Assault Rifle Bravo is the Itra Burst. Not sure why they're nerfing it, but for whatever reason, this ends up being a little bit of a nerf across the board. We got the EM2, which receives a slight buff. This is a buff just to the headshot multiplier, which was powerful to begin with. And then the min damage, which is the long range damage, gets bumped up to 36. So if you're combining this number with the way the damage multipliers work, that could be pretty good. FFAR actually gets a buff in 10 milliseconds, whatever. A little bit more movement stuff to make it feel like it did before, but not overpowered because they didn't really modify the damage all that much. So a slight buff there. Volk gets a minor nerf, and this is just more the movement speed decreased down to 1.42 from 1.55. Shotguns, we got the Ironhide, which is the least used shotgun I think in the game, and it's not even close. This is a really bad weapon for the longest. I don't know if this is going to make it like so it gets a 2-shot potential more often, but the Ironhide did get a slight buff. Headshot damage is also increased, so maybe you can get a 1-shot. I don't know. A lot of times with the buck and slug stuff, it gets a little bit wonky. Combat shotgun rechamber time has been decreased by 10%. So that's a buff. And then they buffed the damage profile. So they had nerfed it. Maybe they went too far and now they're bringing it back. And then the Gallo receives a buff. Not really a fan of shotgun metas, but who knows? Maybe this thing will be back. And then we got Street Sweeper, which also received a slight buff. And I think these ones are just getting the attention that they missed out on the last pass through for shotguns. Arma gets a nerf, slight nerf. Across the board. Not sure about the neck damage multiplier. It says it goes from 1.3 down from 1.3. So I'm thinking this is probably like 1.35 or something like that. So minor nerfs all the way across. We'll see if that actually impacts it. The fast fire rate is what makes that gun so forgiving that even if the TTK isn't the fastest, you're most likely to get close to that TTK when you use it in practice. So nerfs across there. Bullfrog receives a slight buff just to make it get consistent damage values around the body. Hopefully, you know, it's something that is fun and usable within the current meta. The RA225 gets a sizable nerf. The neck damage jumps from 1.7 down to 1.1. The bonuses have been decreased, and then they extended the mag. So that's a good thing on the mag size. So you get a little more variety there because that was an issue with these mags. But overall, we'll kind of see how that one plays out because not a lot of people are using that anyways. We got the Blixen, which got a slight nerf. The ISO, which receives a slight buff. CX9 gets a slight buff. KSP, for whatever reason, you get the auto burst, which means that if you hold it, it'll just go burst, burst, burst. You don't have to spam the trigger. Lower extremity damage multiplier decrease, so it got a slight nerf, which I don't really get. And then Submachine Gun Charlie is the MP40, which ends up getting a slight nerf to bullet velocity and range, which I don't really think that was necessary, but there it is. PPSH gets a slight nerf to the damage, and then also the leg multiplier is nerfed as well. So you got to be a little bit more center mass, which isn't necessarily hard when the hip fire is that tight. And then they also decrease the mag size, which is going to make it harder to use. There's just all in all, they're really trying to make the PPSH people veer away from it. We've had it for a while. In reality, we've had the PPSH as meta for like over a month, right? Same thing with the UGM, which also receives a slight nerf across the board there. And that one's going to be harder to use. This thing was just so dumb, broken. It kind of just made the game less fun to play, and they've lowered the mag, so you have to reload more often. Marksman Rifles, we got the crossbow, which gets a buff. They kind of reverting the nerf they just gave it, because with the nerf they had given it, it made it so you could not one-shot even with the explosive unless you got a headshot. So now I think it's a little bit more forgiving. Hopefully this is what this means with the lower torso and stuff like that. M1 Garand gets a slight nerf. Recoil control is decreased, so this is not helping as much as it was before. It doesn't say the exact values though. They're kind of secretive on the perk stuff. Sniper rifle, this is the AX50, gets a slight nerf to the bullet velocity, minor. Dragunov gets a little bit of love. They increase the range, they increase the damage across the board. Not sure if that's enough to be usable, but it is what it is. The Rytech can now one-shot down to a player at all ranges if you hit a headshot. Interesting. That just adds it to those weapons. It does have a little bit interesting gun that I've never really liked. Pellington receives a buff across the board, a little bit better ADS, which is nice, and then better damage multipliers, which should help, especially on the smaller maps. Gorenko gets a bullet drop-off increase, so that's nerf. Fire rate is nerfed, and a few other nerfs across the board. Then we got the Clouser, which gets a slight buff all the way across the board. And then we got launchers. The Joker gets a buff, and then I believe the launcher alpha here is a Sigma, which also receives a buff. And then we got the underbarrel. The ADS time is now decreased by, so they added a nerf to the bipod. Optics, scope magnification transition increased, so they nerfed the transition heavy, and then visual recoil increased by 15%. They're really like jabbing it to this 3 to 6x. The 4 to 8x, they basically gone through and preemptively destroyed those ones as well. So we should have noticeable differences there. Gun perks, mechanic, more damage to vehicles. Vital now actually has more recoil. The penalty is a little bit larger. Not a huge difference, but still there. And then steady ADS while firing is increased to 4% instead of 5%. So that one gets a slight buff. Recoil booster, hip fire accuracy now decreased by 3%. That is a lot of changes. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.